Hello there, a very good evening and welcome to another edition of Primetime News on TV1. I'm Charlene Benedict for the Newsfirst team.
And I'm Thiruni Karunaratna. Let's start off with a look at your top stories for tonight.
Sri Lanka president stands firm on 5-year term limit, supports election commission's decision to hold presidential poll.
රනිල් වික්‍රමසිංහ ජනාධිපතිතුමා කරන්නේ ওই වැඩේ. ඒ කියන්නේ ළමයවත් කොනිටනවා තොටිල්ලත් ඔල්ලනවා.
ඔයලා බලන්නේ මිනිස්සු කවුද කියලා. ඩාක්මිනියව දන්නවද? අපි දෙන්නේ නැහැ කිසිම පෙත්සම.
ජනාධිපතිතුමා කියන දේ කරන්නේ නැහැ නේ. ඒක කොහොමද පිළිගන්නේ?
Vignesan announces move to unite Tamil political parties to put forward a common candidate. Court order prevents execution of Gazette on increased wages of estate workers. Sri Lanka and bondholders agree on debt restructuring terms. Yuko relaunched from today.
The Election Commission will be empowered to proclaim the date for the presidential election in 13 days.
With all the developments surrounding the impending presidential election and some very important news coming this evening, the Supreme Court has decided to consider the petition requesting for an interim order to postpone the presidential election until an interpretation is provided regarding the end date of the president's term by a 5-member panel. The petition will be taken up for consideration on Monday.
In a related development, Sri Lankan President Ranil Wickremesinghe firmly believes that the president's term is 5 years. The president's media division, in a statement earlier in the day, said that the president supports the Election Commission's decision to hold the presidential election in 2024. The president's media division issued a statement to the media after its attention was drawn to the petition filed with the Supreme Court seeking to delay the presidential election.
Chamindra Dayan Lenava had filed a determination application regarding the president's term in office with the Supreme Court and sought an order against members of the Election Commission, preventing them from taking further steps with regard to the presidential election. The president's media division said that the filing of the petition was brought to the attention of the government. Quote, "It has been brought to the attention of the government that one Chamindra Dayan Lenava has filed an application in the Supreme Court under and in terms of Article 126, read with Articles 12.1, 82.6, 3, 4, 118 and 125 of the Constitution of the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka, praying inter alia for a declaration that Article 32 should not be interpreted to be amended ab initio by Section 3 of the 19th Amendment to the Constitution, and accordingly the Election Commission shall hold the next presidential election taking into account that the term of the office of the President is 6 years, and for an interim order restraining the members of the Election Commission from taking any further steps in conducting a presidential election in 2024 until the Supreme Court determines this application." President Ranil Wickremesinghe states that the said Chamindra Dayan Lenava has not consulted the President or his lawyers prior to filing this application in the Supreme Court. End quote. The President's media division said that President Ranil Wickremesinghe is firmly of the opinion that the term of the President is 5 years and the Election Commission is correct in taking steps to hold the presidential election in 2024.
The Samagi Jana Balavegia, being the main opposition faction, said that the president should inform the court via the Attorney General that the president's term is 5 years.
දැන් මේ ශ්‍රේෂ්ඨාධිකරණයට ගිහලා තියෙන පුද්ගලයා ඇවිල්ලා
The individual who has submitted an application to the Supreme Court is perceived as intending to distort the democratic principles of the country. The President should summon the Attorney General and seek his advice, just like he does when the teachers went on strike. President Ranil Wickremesinghe is urged to take appropriate action in this matter, as the disruption in the political sphere resembles the turbulence experienced by a child in a cradle.
එහෙම නැතුව අර ළමයාවත් කොඩිත්තලා තොටිල්ල හොල්ලන වැඩේ නම් කරන්න එපා. රනිල් වික්‍රමසිංහ ජනාධිපති ජනාධිපතිතුමා කරන්නේ ওই වැඩේ. ඒ කියන්නේ ළමයවත් කොනිත්තනවා තොටිල්ලත් ඔල්ලනවා. මොකද අපි දන්නවනේ අපේ ලොක්කා ගැන. සමහරට එයාගේ කියුම් වලට අපිත් ළමයි කොනිත්තලා තියෙනවා තොටිල්ල හොල්ලලත් තියෙනවා. මේ රටේ නීතිය ආදි
He is working against the rule of law and democracy. Therefore, we suspect whether he had a hand in filing the said application, and after it became a mess, he issued a statement noting that he was not aware. It is imperative that the Attorney General inform the Supreme Court of the President's stance on the matter, particularly reaffirming the understanding that the presidential term is indeed stipulated as 5 years as per legal interpretation. So let's play the match. However, you will lose.
මේ මැච් එකේ ප්ලේයර් කෙනෙක් හැටියට තමයි ඉන්නෝ. හැබැයි ඔයා පරදිනකොට අම්පයර් වෙන්න බෑ.
ඇයි මේ ගේම් ගන්න? ඇයි මේ වංගු දාන්න?
What is the purpose behind these political maneuvers? Why is Ranil Wickremesinghe afraid of calling for an election while consistently advocating for the parliament to establish a government instead? Such actions appear to challenge the democratic process. Additionally, there are insinuations that he may be attempting to exert influence over the judiciary by using terms like judicial cannibalism. Is something wrong with the president's seat?
මේ ජනාධිපති පුටුවේ වැරද්දක්ද මන් දන්නේ. පිස්සු කෙලින්නෙම මේ පුටුවට ආවා.
The head of election operations of the United National Party asserts that there will be no change in the presidential polls.
මම ජනාධිපතිය තේරෙන්නේ අනිවාර්යෙන්ම ඔක්තෝබර් මාස පළවෙනි සතියේ වෙනකොට තියෙයි කියලා ලොකු විශ්වාසයක ඉන්නවා. ව්‍යාපාරිකයේ කෝල්මිනියට දාන්න පුළුවන් හොයලා බලන්න මේ මිනිස්සු කවුද කියලා. ධාර්මිනියව දන්නවද අපි දෙන්නේ නැහැ කිසිම පෙත්සම.
Here's the position of Sunil Handonetti from the National People's Power.
මොකද මේ හදන දෙගිඩියාව හදන්නේ
They are aware that they will be defeated. They are not confident of securing a win, or else would they resort to such insane moves? This is how withdrawal takes place ahead of the presidential election.
රනිල් වික්‍රමසිංහ අකුල ගන්න විදිය තමයි ඔය පෙන්වන්නේ. නැත්තම් මේක මේ ජාතික ලැයිස්තුවේ ඉන්න එයාගේ ලේන් එක්ව දාලා එයා අඹ ගෙඩිය කඩන්න try කරන්නේ නිකන් නෙමෙයිනේ.
It is clear that Ranil Wickremesinghe was aware of this petition. He is withdrawing it when the move faces pushback. They will try to conspire until the very last moment. However, the presidential election must take place.
ජනාධිපතිවරණය නියමිත විදිහට පවත්වන්න ඕන. ඒක පවත්වන්න කිසිදු බාධාවක් ඇති කරන්න ඉඩක් අපි තියන්නේ නැහැ.
However, parliamentarian Uday Gammanpilla expressed these views.
අතීත අත්දැකීමක් නිසා අපි නම් මේක බරපතල විදියට
Due to past experiences, we are taking this seriously and paying close attention because a retired military officer connected to the United National Party went to court in the same manner when the local government election was held in January 2023. Everyone laughed at the time, but what happened in the end? The election was not held to date. During the 2023 local government election, they said they won't meddle with it. They are in favor of holding the election and that they will respect the judgment given by court. Initially, they said that they didn't know who filed the case. A photograph of the petitioner holding hands with the president was revealed later. The relationship between the petitioner and the president may be revealed in the future.
ජනාධිපතිතුමා කියන දේ කරන්නේ නැහැ නේ. කොහොමද පිළිගන්නේ?
This is the position of Dala Salha Peruma.
දැන් ආණ්ඩුක්‍රම ව්‍යවස්ථාවේ ඉතාම පැහැදිලිව තියෙනවා
The Constitution is very clear on this matter. Article 32 of Act number 15 of 1981 clearly outlines the presidential term and transitions. From today, we have 93 days until a new leader is set to form a new government for this country. Additionally, in 12 days from now, the Election Commission of Sri Lanka will have the authority to decide the nomination date, select the nomination venue, and conduct the election. No one can challenge or usurp this power. However, the current government is employing various tactics and manipulative strategies. This is a government that indefinitely delayed both the provincial councils and local government elections. When the party's general secretary and chairman publicly state that the presidential election should not be held, it's clear they are trying to create confusion. This is a deceptive narrative. Rest assured, the election will take place as scheduled.
සංවාදයක් ව්‍යාකූලත්වයක් ඇති කරන්නයි අවශ්‍ය වෙලා තියෙන්නේ. නියත වශයෙන්ම මේ දිනවක වාන තුළ මෙතුරන තියෙනවාමයි.
The People's Action for Free and Fair Elections, or PAFREL, expressed concerns over possible attempts being made to discredit the president.
We have a strong suspicion that there may be a faction aiming to undermine the president, either with or without the president's knowledge from within the party. This suspicion arises from discussions surrounding a potential extension of the presidential term through constitutional amendments. Notably, the Supreme Court has already provided clarifications on this matter, following a request from then-President Maithripala Sirisena. Consequently, we maintain the belief that this legal challenge will not impede the scheduled election process. If there were indeed errors in the constitutional amendment as suggested by the individual, it would have been more appropriate to raise these concerns earlier. As the constitutional amendment has been in effect for nearly 8 years, the delayed nature of these objections raises reasonable doubt as to the motives behind the sudden action.
ව්‍යවස්ථා ප්‍රසංස්කරණය සිද්ධ කළා. එතකොට මේ අවසන් මොහොතේ වෙනතෙක් ඔහු රැඳී සිටියේ ඇයි කියන කාරණේ සාධාරණ කාරණේ මෙතනදි මතුවෙනවා.
What is the view of the Youth for Change organization comprising a group of young social and political activists?
No one said this case was filed by Ranil Wickremesinghe. The cat is out of the bag. Today the president suddenly informed the election commission that his term is 5 years. Are the election commission members unaware of the president's term stated in the constitution? Why is the president writing letters to remind them? Ranil Wickremesinghe and the government are knowingly carrying out a conspiracy to postpone the elections. The people of this country should understand it. It looks like the cat is out of the bag now.
State Minister P.L. Nishanta from the SLPP says the election will go ahead as planned.
The election must take place as per the schedule. We are not afraid of the election. The president is also ready to face the election. We have a program in place as well. There is no need to delay the election. Anyone can have their personal views.
Former Northern Province Chief Minister and leader of the Tamil Makkal Thesiya Kutty, C.V. Vignesan, has publicly announced that a Tamil common candidate will be put forward for the presidential election.
දෙමළ මිනිසුන්ගේ දෙමළ අපේක්ෂ කෙනෙක්ව අපි පත් කරන්න යනවා. එයාට තමයි අපි දෙන්නේ. වෙන කාටවත් නෙමෙයි.
ඔව් දැන් කියන්නේ ඒක දෙමළ ජාතිකයෙක් පත් කරන්නේ මේ ඒ කියන්නේ දෙමළ සියලුම මේ පක්ෂ එකතු වෙලාද?
එහෙමයි අපි කරාගෙන යන්නේ. දැනටමත් අපි පක්ෂවල් 7-8ක් එකතු වෙලා අපි මීටිමත් දැම්මා වවුනියාවේ දැන් සුමානකට ඉස්සර.
That's the direction we are heading. We have already held a meeting with 7 or 8 parties in Vaunia. Based on this, we will establish committees to decide on the candidate and encourage our Tamil people to vote for this candidate. However, we are aware that we might not win. We are using this opportunity to seek unity and gauge the people's response to our decisions.
අහන්න මේක අවස්ථාවක් හැටියට අපි පාවිච්චි කරනවා.
ඒ කරන වෙලෙන් ඔය 150 ලැබෙන එක වැළැක්වෙන්න.
ඔව් වැළැක්වෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඒකට මම කිව්වේ
Yes, it could. I suggest that the second or third preference could be given to another candidate. However, our other leaders do not agree with this. Despite that, we will cast our first vote for the one of our own.
ඡන්දය දෙන්නේ අපේ කෙනාට.
An order was issued by the Supreme Court preventing the implementation of the Minister of Labour's Gazette notification, which aimed to increase the wages of plantation workers.
The Supreme Court issued an interim order halting the implementation of the Gazette issued by the Secretary to the Ministry of Labour on the 21st of May, which mandated an increase in daily wages of plantation workers to 1,700 rupees. This order was issued in response to a petition filed by several plantation companies, including the Agarapatana Plantation Company, challenging the wage increase. The petition was taken up before a Supreme Court bench comprising of Justices Gamini Amarasekara, Kumuduni Wickremesinghe and Janak De Silva. The order will remain in effect until the hearing of the petition concludes. The Bribery Commission took action to freeze assets worth over 93 million rupees of former Minister Keheliya Rambukwella's family.
The Commission of Inquiry into allegations of bribery or corruption has frozen 16 fixed bank accounts and 3 insurance policies belonging to family members of former Minister Keheliya Rambukwella. The total value of these assets exceeds 93 million rupees. These actions are in response to charges of money laundering under the Anti-Corruption Act. The affected assets include life insurance policies and private bank accounts of Rambukwella's wife, 3 daughters and 1 daughter's husband. The Bribery Commission announced that after reporting facts to the High Court, the prohibition order will be extended and further investigations will be conducted.
Now, Operation Yuko was relaunched today. Police said that under the revamped operation, various programs will be implemented to rehabilitate drug addicts.
Operation Yuko was carried out from the early hours of this morning, centering the Laksanda Sevana housing complex in Bellampitia. Inspector General of Police Deshabandhu Tennakon was also present to monitor the operation's progress. The Police Special Task Force, Army and Police were involved in the operation, which led to the arrest of 32 suspects facing drug-related charges.
287 people named in the previous document are yet to be arrested. However, intelligence agencies have identified 706 suspects who were arrested and released, engaging in drug rackets as usual. As this is a profitable business, intelligence agencies have also identified 928 people who are newly involved in drug rackets. Accordingly, 1,921 drug racketeers have been named in the list. Through this island-wide operation, we aim to arrest them and direct drug addicts who are not named on the list, especially in the western and southern provinces, to rehabilitation camps.
Operation Yuko was also carried out in several areas around the Kotahena Police Division since the early hours of this morning. 48 suspects were arrested while drugs found in their possession were seized. Operation Yuko was also carried out in Gaul and Ambalangoda police jurisdictions today. A house inspection was also carried out in Mathotagama, Mathara today. Police said drugs worth over 30 million rupees and a foreign manufactured firearm were also found during the search operation. 2 people were arrested. The operation was also carried out in Galbala, Kurunagala. Around 100 houses were searched and 4 people were arrested with illegal drugs.
The power of the
Fear of illness shouldn't be a daily reality. The Anamadu-based hospital receives a lifeline, a repaired dialysis unit, essential medical equipment and a brand new water purification system.
Sri Lanka and the creditors steering committee reached an agreement on the terms for a $12.5 billion bond restructuring, bringing Sri Lanka closer to completing its debt overhaul 2 years after it defaulted. The steering committee comprises of 10 major bondholders representing 50% of the ISBs.
What are international sovereign bonds?
International sovereign bonds serve as a method of accessing funds from international financial markets. Since attaining middle income status in 2007, Sri Lanka has utilized this approach to secure loans from the global market, albeit at elevated interest rates. Following the default in debt repayments in 2022, Sri Lanka is now confronted with the task of settling $12.5 billion in sovereign bond debt. The accrued interest on this outstanding debt amounts to nearly $2.9 billion.
What measures have been taken to service this debt?
The Hamilton Reserve Bank of the United States initiated legal proceedings against Sri Lanka to recover a sum of $250 million in sovereign bonds. This action was taken on behalf of multiple institutions that had invested in said sovereign bonds. Recently, a committee comprising representatives from 10 entities that provided loans through sovereign bonds deliberated on strategies for restructuring Sri Lanka's debt. The discussions involved members of a steering committee representing the bondholders. Sri Lanka's legal and financial advisors Clifford Chance and Lazard participated, as did the bondholders' advisors White & Case and Rothschild & Co. The second round of restricted discussions took place in Paris, France recently, where the parties engaged in restructuring discussions under strict non-disclosure agreements. Subsequently, a consensus was reached regarding the restructuring of the sovereign bonds.
What are these agreements?
This process is intricate in nature. However, it is imperative to simplify it for the better understanding. Currently, there is an accrued interest amounting to nearly $2.9 billion owed to sovereign bondholders for the outstanding debt period. Following negotiations, creditors' steering committee agreed to a haircut of 11% from this total, resulting in a remaining amount of $1.678 billion. It has been decided to issue new sovereign bonds specifically for this adjusted sum, termed as plain vanilla bond, with a maturity period of 4 years and a coupon rate of 4%. Payments are scheduled to commence from the 30th of September of this year. In addition to this, there is a payment of $225 million as a consideration for expressing consent to the restructuring process. The most complex aspect involves repaying the outstanding debt exceeding $8 billion that is due from 2028 onwards. The repayment approach, known as macro-linked bonds, entail the repayment being contingent on the economic growth progress of Sri Lanka. Should Sri Lanka achieve a gross domestic product of $88.6 billion by the time the debt is entirely repaid in 2028, there will be a nominal debt haircut of 28%. Furthermore, if the gross domestic product reaches $100 billion, the debt reduction would stand at 14.96%. Conversely, a drop in the gross domestic product below $88.6 billion would allow for a more substantial debt haircut of over 30%. An additional restructuring proposal involving nearly $2 billion of sovereign bond debt is suggested to be implemented through the governance-linked bonds. This method aligns the credit cuts and concessions with the efficiency of the governance process, proposing a 0.5% loan reduction.
What happens next?
Sri Lanka and bondholders agreeing on debt restructuring terms was revealed in a filing with the London Stock Exchange. Confirmation is needed from Sri Lanka's official creditor committee to ensure it aligns with agreed terms. IMF staff will also review it to ensure consistency with Sri Lanka's IMF-supported program. After it passed both the OCC and IMF, the international sovereign bonds can be subject to restructuring. The International Monetary Fund has taken note of the new development with respect to the restricted discussions between the Sri Lankan government and the ad hoc group of bondholders. Peter Brewer, the senior mission chief for Sri Lanka, said the IMF is currently awaiting additional information and will provide the authorities with an assessment of the agreed terms to ensure consistency with the parameters and debt sustainability objectives under the IMF-supported program.
Dr. Harsha De Silva commented on the agreement.
දැන් මූලික දේ කියන්න ඕනේ මේ 128 නාමික මූණතාගේ කපා හැරීම.
The fundamental point to address is that the 28% nominal face value deduction, otherwise the haircut, will not reflect the actual conditions. This is crucial because the haircut will take effect in 2028. At that time, the macro-linked bond, as previously discussed, will be tied to the GDP. When these figures are converted to US dollars, the face value cut will fluctuate Market expectations, based on current discussions and the performance of our country's international bonds and other exchanges, suggest that our GDP will reach $100 billion by 2028. If this projection holds true, the haircut will decrease to 14.96%. If the earlier agreement was signed, this haircut would have dropped to 7.3%. We have strived to exert maximum pressure and bring the best possible terms. Like I said earlier, we have to carry this next. We have managed to move this to a certain level as we expected.
ඉතින් ඒ නිසා අපි දකිනවා යම්කිසි විදියකට කලින් බලාපොරොත්තු වෙච්ච තැනට වඩා තව වෙනත් තැනකට මෙය ගෙනල්ලා තියෙනවා.
Leader of the United Republic Front, partly Champika Ranawaka, commented on the matter.
බරපතල ප්‍රශ්න අපිට ගෙනාවේ මෙන්න මේ වාණිජ ණය වලින්. මහින්ද රාජපක්ෂ මහත්තයා බලයට පත් වෙනකොට 105 තිබිච්ච වාණිජ ණය අධික.
The significant problems we face today stem from commercial loans. By 2015, Mahinda Rajapaksa had increased the proportion of short-term commercial loans to 50%, up from 5% when he took office. This escalation led to a debt repayment crisis that our country could not sustain, risking bankruptcy. Consequently, subsequent governments had to secure additional loans to pay the interest, creating a vicious cycle. Gotabaya Rajapaksa also had to navigate this same challenging process. During Gotabaya Rajapaksa's brief tenure, 78% of the debt accumulated during Mahinda Rajapaksa's administration was repaid over 2 years. There is another party linked to these loans, and that is the China Development Bank, from which around $3 billion was obtained. During this period, Ajit Nivad Cabral, who was overseeing the treasury, engaged in a deal with Hamilton Reserve, a bank located in a tax haven. That bank and several others have filed legal action against Sri Lanka in a US court. But according to the agreement and international stock market laws, if more than 50% of international creditors agree to a debt repayment and reduction process, the remaining creditors must comply. This year alone, we are due to repay $724 million, and by 2029, new bonds will be issued, extending until 2038. By 2038, we will need to pay back a total of $1,264 million in bonds and interest. By the end of this repayment period, the total amount paid will be $15.964 billion, translating to approximately $16 billion in repayments. Is this situation favorable or not? Could we have achieved something better?
2038 දක්වා යන. එතකොට 2038 දී අපට ඒ බැඳුම් කරවලයි පොලියයි ඔක්කොම ඩොලර් මිලියන 1264ක් ගෙවන්න ඕනේ. ඔක්කොම ගෙවලා ඉවරනකොට ඩොලර් මිලියන 15963. ඒ කියන්නේ ආසන්නෙන් ඩොලර් බිලියන 16ක් පමණ ආපසු ගෙවන්න වෙනවා. දැන් මේක සුබද සුබ ආරංචියක්ද එහෙම නැත්නම් අසුබ ආරංචියක්ද එහෙම නැත්නම් මීකට වඩා යමක් කරගන්න තිබුණාද අපිට කියන වගේ ප්‍රශ්න මතුවෙනවා.
Several protests were held across the island today by trade unions over several demands, including salary increments.
State Bank's United Trade Union Alliance staged several protests opposite banks across the island today. The protesters allege that the collective agreement proposed by the Board of Directors has been curtailed by Treasury officials.
We decided to stage a walkout at 3:15 p.m. on the 10th and further intensify our action.
The United Postal Trade Unions Front also staged several protests across the island, demanding that they be made permanent employees.
If we don't get an answer by the 8th, by 12 midnight on the 7th, we will close down all post offices for 48 hours and force the government.
It has been 64 days since university non-academic staff had launched their trade union action. The United University Trade Unions Collective launched this trade union action against slashing their salaries by 15% and not increasing their monthly allowances. The satyagraha that has been organized in line with the trade union action opposite several universities are continuing. A satyagraha was also launched opposite the University Grants Commission today. Meanwhile, the Educational Non-Academic Employees Union convened a media briefing in Kandy today.
If a discussion along with a written promise is not given to us before the 7th, on the 8th and 9th, we will launch a trade union action of putting in sick leave and not reporting to work.
State sector employees reported to work today wearing black armbands. State sector and provincial state sector employees demanded that their allowances be increased to 25,000 rupees in line with the increase in allowances of executive grade state sector employees. The United Service Trade Union Alliance convened a media briefing today and announced that they will join in the strike action on the 8th and the 9th of this month.
As development officers trade unions, we have taken a decision to join the strike action on the 8th and 9th. The issue that we have is that there are many state sector employees below the executive grade employees who work on the ground level.
The token trade union action launched by customs officials against the planned amendments to the customs ordinance was suspended this afternoon.
Opposition leader Sajid Premadasa says that he will stand in solidarity with the people of Palestine.
I must emphasize that we will stand in solidarity with the people of Palestine. We strongly condemn the inhumane attacks being carried out on them by the Israeli government. We also say that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu must immediately put a halt to this genocide. By the end of this year, we will stick to this policy and continue to stand in solidarity with the people of Palestine.
Opposition leader Sajid Premadasa made this statement at the event held to gift a smart classroom to the Al-Azhar Girls High School in Eravar Batiklo under the 284th phase of the Sakwala program.
20th century, a missed moment in history and the national renaissance. A celebration and book launch was held at the Colombo Foundation today. The event was chaired by leader of the National People's Power, Anura Kumara Disanayaka. On the 4th of July 2024, the United States of America celebrates Independence Day, marking the anniversary of the nation's declaration of independence from the British rule in 1776.
This year, the 4th of July will mark the 248th anniversary of the founding of the United States. It has been a federal holiday in the US since 1941. Independence Day in the United States, the annual celebration of nationhood. It commemorates the passage of the Declaration of Independence by the Continental Congress on the 4th of July, 1776. The Congress had voted in favor of independence from Great Britain on the 2nd of July, but did not actually complete the process of revising the Declaration of Independence, originally drafted by Thomas Jefferson in consultation with fellow committee members John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, Roger Sherman and William Livingston until 2 days later. With the growth of diversification of American society, the 4th of July commemoration became a patriotic tradition which many groups, not just political parties, sought to claim. In honor of the US Independence Day, US Ambassador Chung shared a message.
248 years ago, nothing was certain about America's experiment in democracy. Democracy is not static. It is a process, a continued renewal of commitments, of fundamental principles. As President Biden said, one of the strengths of America is a right to free expression and free speech. We've seen protesters across the United States and here in Sri Lanka exercise these rights, advocating for different paths forward. Though dissent can be challenging, the United States welcomes it. This is the essence of our First Amendment, the right to freedom of expression. It takes work to sustain democracy, and at times it can seem fragile. But I have no doubt that we Americans will continue strengthening our democracy and pursuing accountability and integrity within our institutions of government. As an immigrant to the United States, I have come to deeply appreciate the power and privilege of participating in a democracy, including the right to vote. But frankly, voting is not just a right, it is a profound responsibility that underscores the essence of freedom in any great nation. So as we celebrate today, let's remember that the American dream isn't just a dream, it's a promise to keep striving, believing, and achieving. Today, Americans commemorate not just the birth of our nation, but the enduring spirit of unity and freedom that defines us and the U.S.-Sri Lanka Partnership.
Sri Lanka Life Saving conducted a special water safety program in Bendota in celebration of the 248th anniversary of US independence.
Sri Lanka Lifesaving partnered with the Pacific Augmentation Team and the US Embassy in Colombo for a special water safety program for the village community. The program was held in Bentota to celebrate the 248th anniversary of US independence and the cultural and ethnic diversity of the people of America. Sri Lanka Lifesaving expressed gratitude to US Ambassador to Sri Lanka, Julie Chung, for her dedication to creating safer aquatic environments for Sri Lanka.
A global summit under the theme Empowering Higher Education, Integrating 21st Century Skills Across Disciplines was inaugurated at the University of Sri Jayawardhanapura yesterday.
Organised by the Department of Philosophy and Psychology of the University of Sri Jayawardhanapura, the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences and the International Centre for Multidisciplinary Studies, in collaboration with the Mannan Maniam Sundaranar University in Tirunelveli, India, the summit aims to explore indigenous educational methods and strategies that can be effectively applied in the modern world. The summit will be held from the 3rd to the 5th of July 2024 at the University of Sri Jayawardhanapura.
20th Century, a missed moment in history and the National Renaissance. A celebration and book launch was held at the Colombo Foundation today. The event was chaired by leader of the National People's Power, Anura Kumara Disanayaka.
Maithripala Sirisena introduced the 19th Amendment, reducing his term in office from 6 years to 5 years. He gave speeches about being the first president to reduce his term. However, when his term was nearing an end, he asked the Supreme Court if he could remain in office for 6 years. The Attorney General at the time, who is the current Chief Justice, informed court that Maithripala Sirisena was elected for 6 years and that this change won't affect him, but it will affect presidents elected after him. Yesterday, the president elected after Maithripala Sirisena has asked the Supreme Court if he can remain in office for 6 years. Who are these leaders? Do you think that they are leaders? They are power-hungry, cruel, and a destructive class. We need an era of social justice.
And some news from overseas now. July 4th is expected to go down in history as one of the worst election defeats for a governing party in British history.
Millions of people are voting in the UK general election. It's the first general election at which voters must bring a photo ID to vote in person, and the first July election since 1945. After months of will he, won't he, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak called a snap general election in the rain on the 22nd of May, triggering a 6-week campaign that ended yesterday. With his Conservative Party, the Tories, more than 20 points behind in the polls after 14 years in power, he hoped the surprise decision would catch the opposition Labour Party on the back foot. The House of Commons, the only elected chamber of the UK Parliament, has 650 seats, 543 in England, 57 in Scotland, 32 in Wales, and 18 in Northern Ireland. A party therefore needs to win 326 seats for a majority of 2, 327 for a majority of 4, and so on. Polls are predicting a Labour landslide and a Tory wipeout in England and Wales, and Labour advances in dozens of seats at the expense of the SNP in Scotland. The UK has a first-past-the-post system, with the Commons made up of 650 mini-elections, each for an individual MP. The handover of power after a British election defeat happens with neck-breaking speed. If the Tories lose, Sunak would be expected to travel back to London around dawn on Friday. If Labour wins a majority, Sunak would be expected to give a farewell speech on the steps of Number 10 late morning before being driven to Buckingham Palace to tender his resignation to King Charles.
US President Joe Biden vowed to stay in the 2024 presidential race during calls with campaign staff and meetings with Democratic lawmakers and governors as he sought to shake off calls for him to drop out after his shaky debate performance last week.
US President Joe Biden increased his outreach to lawmakers, Democratic governors and staffers after days of criticism that he hasn't done enough to personally tamp down on nervousness that he should abandon his run for re-election. The effort included calls to congressional Democratic leaders and a meeting with Democratic governors, including 10 who traveled to Washington to attend in person. Nearly a week after the debate, Biden and senior aides are still scrambling to recover from his devastating performance and quash growing calls for him to step down as the party's nominee in the November election. Following a meeting between Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris and governors, the state officials emerged and largely echoed one another in offering praise for Biden, with several referring to being all in and being partners who have one another's backs. A campaign official said no when asked if any of the governors asked the president to step aside. After the meeting, a campaign official said Biden sought the advice and expertise of Democratic governors. The meeting came after a day of calls reassuring campaign staff members and Democratic lawmakers. On an all-hands call with campaign staffers, Biden made it clear that he didn't plan to exit the race. Moments later, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre reiterated Biden's comments at a briefing, telling reporters that he is absolutely not considering stepping down.
2024 T20 Cricket World Cup champions India returned to their home country today amidst massive celebrations.
India were crowned champions of the T20 Cricket World Cup on Saturday after 17 years by defeating South Africa in the finals. The Indian team's return to their country was delayed due to Hurricane Beryl, which affected the Barbados where the tournament was held. Foreign media reported that thousands of sports fans arrived at the Indira Gandhi International Airport to welcome the victorious team. The world champions also met Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and the Premier congratulated them on the win.
And that's a wrap of Primetime News on TV1 for tonight.
Thank you for watching.
Good night.